So, uploading the video, of strangers, of strangers, you know, strangers told lies and lied of what my character is of myself, you know. Ever since I was a child, I have been a mental health patient ever since elementary school, way before high school, and a mental health patient in middle school, way before high school, and a mental health patient in high school, and since being grown, being a mental health patient, and strangers told lies of who I am, and I don't know them because of them being strangers, I was sexually abused when I was in elementary school. And I told when I was in elementary school. I told when I was an elementary school student that I was sexually abused inside of the household I grew up inside of is where I was sexually abused when I was an elementary school student. And I told when I was an elementary school student. And then when I was in middle school, in the 6th grade, after the 6th grade, when the 6th grade was over, in the year of 1996, they say, was the year after I was in the 6th grade. It was the summertime of between leaving the 6th grade and going to the 7th grade. They say it was a car accident and bad stuff happened with my body because of a car accident when I was running down the street because two strangers seemed to have been trying getting me into a sex threesome of having sex with them. And I ran from them. And strangers made claims of a car accident in the year of 1996. They say it was a setup because the household I grew up inside of had promised some strangers some money from, I don't know if it was the car accident or if the strangers wanted me losing my life for getting insurance money, or some kind of scam. Strangers said, it was no accident because strangers was promised the money from the setup of hurting me, because strangers was using children. Strangers, because I do not know them, strangers for getting money from strangers who was children, the youngest inside of households, because of targeting which strangers seen as being the weakest, smallest, littlest, youngest ones inside of households of strangers. And is why my body was hurt from being used without even knowing what had happened, because I was not part of planning a scam of hurting myself in a car accident for money for child abusers. And they say in the year of 1996, when it happened, the household I grew up inside of was a household where grown people seemed being strangers because I do not know them. And the strangers had a history of sexually abusing strangers who was children, and strangers, because I do not know them, is why the character of strangers is said of them being strangers. And in the summer of the sixth grade, when it was 1996, meaning the sixth grade was over, and it was the summer before going to the seventh grade for me. When they say a car accident claim happened in 1996. And then it was a stranger inside of the household I grew up inside of, who they said was a grown person. You know, they said he was 18 years of age or older when a child was born who is a stranger, who was born from a middle school girl who is a stranger when it was 1996 and Valentine's Day of the year of 1996, I think it was February 14th, was the birthday when the stranger was born, February 14th, 1996. And they said the stranger was a child who was born from another stranger who was a middle school girl. And the stranger who was a middle school girl had voluntarily had sex with a child abuser who is a stranger, you know, and they say he is a child abuser because they say the meaning of a child abuser can mean 6 reasons when he was at least 18 years of age or older when the child was born February 14th, who is a stranger, who was born February 14th, 1996, Valentine's Day, meaning the stranger who they say is or was the stranger who had got the middle school girl pregnant, the middle school girl who is a stranger. They say the stranger who got the girl pregnant was 18 years of age or older when the stranger who was born February 14th, 1996, was born from a middle school girl who is a stranger who gave birth to a child who is a stranger. And the stranger was born February 14th, 1996 in Birmingham, Alabama. And the stranger was brought inside of the household I grew up inside of which is how I know it was February 14th, 1996, because the strangers was having a big argument about the age gap of the stranger who was 18 years of age or older when the child who is a stranger was born February 14th, 1996. So it was a bad household I grew up inside of, a household full of strangers, and I am not one of them. And growing up inside a crazy household, so crazy, being a mental health patient ever since elementary school, middle school, and all of that is evidence of the sexuality of sexual abuse those strangers who was inside of the household I grew up in have evidence of a character of them being sexually abusive to strangers who was underage middle school students and elementary school students. And it's crazy because in the year of 1996, I was a middle school student myself. I was I finished the sixth grade in 1996 and started the seventh grade in 1996, which is evidence that the grown people who were strangers inside of the household I grew up in was grown people who was having sex with children my age. Strangers, because I do not know them. The children who was my age, the strangers who was my age, the children and the strangers who was my age, who was having sex with the strangers who was the grown people inside of the household I grew up inside of. So, I started the seventh grade, you know, inside of a different household because the strangers had used the money from the insurance claim of what they said was a car accident, what happened to me. And the strangers had got a house and moved into the house. And I was never a fan of the house because I am not a fan of the house because it was not my idea of moving into that house at that location. Those strangers chose being in. So, I tried getting my own money since those strangers had stole money from my insurance claim. So, first chance I got when it was the eighth grade summer, I got a job working in the summer of the eighth grade while strangers of the same age group was doing what that strange girl did of getting pregnant or having sex with grown people in middle school is what those strangers was doing in middle school or in the summer. Instead of working at a job, when I was working at a job in the summer of the 8th grade, and it was part time because after all of those mental health doctors and physical disabilities of bad stuff what happened to me, the job was part time, you know, something like 3 months. A summer job. And then I started going to high school in the 9th grade and noticed the same thing with strangers. A lot of them were strangers who was getting pregnant and having sex with grown people who were strangers. And the grown people who were strangers was grown people who was having sex with a child. High school students and middle school students and stuff with evidence of the birth certificates of strangers when the strangers was born and claims of who the strangers are who claimed being the stranger's baby mama or baby daddy, the strangers, all of them strangers. Because I don't know them. So, starting high school, it was hard, and I never graduated high school because of not being smart enough, you know, and because of all of the sexual abuse strangers was doing to myself and others. Strangers. I never graduated high school, and I never caused problems because I was never in a fight at high school. I was never in a fight at high school. And it's crazy because a stranger lied about me fighting since high school. And I thought about it. My age, 14, when I started high school, I was never fighting in high school when I was 14. I was never fighting in high school when I was 15. I was never fighting in high school when I was 16. I was never fighting in high school when I was 17. And I stopped going to high school when I was 17. Because when I was 17, I was going to a school called Virginia College. Not being smart enough for graduating college at Virginia College, I tried going to other colleges, not being smart enough, I never graduated college. And I was never fighting at college, way after high school. So a stranger told a lie about fighting since high school, about me fighting since high school, because I was never in a fight at high school when I was 14, 15, 16, and 17. And I was never in a fight at college, at Virginia College, or at a college I went to. So a stranger told lies about me. I don't know why a stranger would have told lies about me after my life was so hard from being abused sexually and physically since I was a child, with evidence of the scars and doctor medical records since elementary school of being a mental health patient. It's crazy that a stranger would have told lies since high school about me, you know. I went to college when I was 17 and 18. As soon as I turned 18, I got my own place, staying inside of a hotel, and it's crazy the lies people told, strangers is what I mean when I say the lies strangers told. A stranger said, before, Brendan does not seem abusive to me. When you look at the evidence of a Brendan's life, all of those years of growing up inside of a bad household of strangers is not a Brendan's fault. And the evidence of the first chance a Brendan had of getting out of the household of strangers, Brendan got out of the household of strangers, which is evidence of a Brendan not being one of them. Strangers. And crazy, a stranger, the same thing I've been saying. A Brendan's character does not seem abusive. It does not seem abusive moving out of a household at the age of 18 years old because the household was a bad household of grown people having sex with a child. It does not seem abusive when a Brendan was paying the rent every day, the full price at a hotel when a Brendan was 18 years old. It does not seem abusive when a Brendan was working part-time at jobs through temp services when Brandon was 18 years old, paying his own rent at the age of 18 years old, being the head of his household since 18 years old inside of a hotel room. It does not seem abusive when a Brandon saved his virginity for the purpose of being married instead of playing 6 games. It does not seem abusive when a Brandon never scored because a Brandon never played a 6 game, meaning a Brandon never had voluntary going all the way 6 inside of the mouth or butt or womb outside of the identity of what his marriage license certificate says his marriage is. It does not seem abusive when, since the age of 18, a Brandon was paying his own rent inside of a hotel room, very expensive, paying the daily price every day for his own household, being his own triad. It does not seem abusive when a Brandon at the age of 19 was getting ready for his marriage license certificate, and at the age of 20, a Brandon got his own marriage license certificate in the year of 2004. It does not seem abusive when in the year of 2004, being the head of household, Brandon got his first apartment in the city of Warrior, Alabama. From working those part-time jobs with disabilities after being abused and using his own income being all the income inside of his own household in the year of 2004 in Warrior, Alabama, when Brandon moved into his first apartment home in the city of Warrior, Alabama. Working part-time with disabilities with no other income other than his own income inside of his household, being the head of household in the city of Warrior, Alabama, when Brandon was 20 years old in the year of 2004. It does not seem like abuse when the apartment was the same apartment Brandon lived in August 31st, 2004 and July 18th, 2006. And Brandon was never fighting inside the household or outside the household during those times of the household from May 2004 and the year of 2006. It does not seem like abuse when it was no fighting from a Brandon at all, anywhere, during the time of May 2004 and the year of 2006. It does not seem like abuse. And the same way, October 6, 2008, a Brandon had no other income inside of his household other than his own income when it was October 6, 2008. And it does not seem abusive. When a Brandon having his own household was never fighting at all. Inside the household or outside the household, Brandon stayed in. When it was October 6, 2008, it does not seem abusive when all of the evidence of a Brandon being inside of a family court case since October 6, 2006 has evidence of being the head of household. At every court date, Brandon attended, Brandon had a household, being the head of household. And never seemed abusive. Whether in high school or way after high school. Which is why it seems very strange that a stranger would have told lies accusing a Brandon of being abusive since high school. Seems to be a lie a stranger told. Which a lot of lawyers and attorneys and others say is slander, defamation of character, and they say if a stranger claimed being a police officer and had wrote those lies accusing a Brandon of being abusive since high school, then the crime would be what the person who claimed being a police officer did, when the person who claimed being a police officer wrote a fake, false police report of lies accusing a Brandon of being abusive since high school, when it is no evidence of a Brandon being abusive since high school, because a family court has evidence of Brandon being the head of household since high school, working part time at different jobs, mostly being the type of having no other income inside the household other than his own income, whether from working part time with disabilities or whether from disability. You know, those letters which came in the mail in those blue envelopes which said to a Brandon, meaning a Brandon had no other income other than his own income inside of his household. The same way when a Brandon moved to Georgia, sometime near 2014, the year of 2014, with letters from Social Security saying to a Brandon, meaning a stranger was not supposed to have opened his letters if the letters said to a Brandon, then a Brandon being the head of household had no other income other than income which said to a Brandon when a Brandon moved to the state of Georgia in the year of 2014. So, you know, being a mental health patient myself, because I am a Brandon, I told, and they say, you know, a stranger caused a lot of problems. And I don't know why a stranger caused a lot of problems. When a stranger could have simply said, a stranger does not know a Brandon. So there was never a reason for a stranger causing problems to a Brandon. Because a stranger could not live the life a Brandon lived. A stranger could not handle the suffering a Brandon suffered. A stranger seems afraid and scared of going to jail or prison for the crimes a stranger did to a Brandon. Which is evidence a Brandon is greater than the stranger. Because a Brandon pled guilty a lot of times in court, not being scared of going to jail, not being scared of pleading guilty. Which is why they say the stranger lost. Because the stranger is scared of pleading guilty. The stranger is scared of going to jail. The stranger is no match for me. This is what they say. So no, they say the stranger needs evidence of being greater than a Brandon. The stranger needs evidence of not being scared of going to jail. The stranger needs evidence of pleading guilty in the courtroom for the crimes did to a Brandon. The stranger needs evidence of showing the stranger's face in public and telling the world what the stranger did to me. It's what they say the stranger needs evidence of. Because the stranger is not greater than a Brandon, they say. You know what they say? They say so they say it's the year 2024. They say it's 10 calendar years later from the year 2014 of when the Brandon first moved to Georgia. And they say whoever the stranger is, the stranger seems scared of pleading guilty in court. The stranger seems scared of going to jail. The stranger seems scared of going to prison. The stranger seems scared of saying what the stranger did to a Brandon and being punished for what the stranger did is what they say the stranger is scared of. When a Brandon was never scared because a Brandon always pled guilty in court, proving a Brandon was never scared. So they say a stranger thinks the city of Macon should do something about the stranger who sexually abused a Brandon. A stranger said the county of Bibb County should do something about the stranger who sexually abused a Brandon. They say, the state of Georgia should do something about the stranger who sexually abused a Brandon. And what they say it means is the city government of Macon should do something about the stranger who sexually abused a Brandon. And it should be made public with faces showing and names being called of the strangers. And, they said the Bibb County government should do something about the stranger who sexually abused a Brandon. And it should be made public with faces showing and with names being called. And they say a stranger says the state government, what they call the prosecutors or office and stuff, should do something about the stranger who sexually abused the Brandon. And it should be made public with faces showing and with names being called. The same way the strangers made it public and used a Brandon's name and had a Brandon's face showing when the strangers had sexually abused and when the strangers had, did bad stuff to a Brandon. And they say the reason why it should be made public with faces showing and names being called is because if a stranger claims being greater than a Brandon, then a stranger would have to walk that walk if a stranger wants to talk that talk. And a stranger would have to show their face if a stranger wants the position of such a place. If a stranger cannot plead guilty in court, then a stranger is not greater than me. If the stranger cannot show the stranger's face, then the stranger is not greater than me. If the stranger cannot say the name of themselves, then the stranger is not greater than me. If the stranger cannot go in the courtroom and tell that the stranger did all of those crimes to a Brandon, then the stranger is not greater than a Brandon. It's what they say, it's what they say, it's what they say. And you know what else they say? They say, the stranger would try to say, the stranger does not care about a Brandon. The stranger does not care what happens to a Brandon. The stranger does not care what a Brandon says, and the stranger does not care what a Brandon does. But they say, nope, it's not gonna work. The stranger saying that the stranger does not care about a Brandon is just an excuse because the stranger is scared of pleading guilty. The stranger cannot use the excuse of not caring about a Brandon. The stranger cannot use the excuse of not caring about what a Brandon says. The stranger cannot use the excuse of not caring about what a Brandon does. The stranger needs evidence of not being scared of pleading guilty in court and doing the time for doing the crime to a Brandon. And it says more than one stranger. Because if it was a stranger who typed lies in a police report, or if it was a stranger who filed the charges about something that did not happen, and then all of the strangers who were part of abusing a Brandon and accusing a Brandon, you know, it means those who were strangers who told lies against a Brandon, and anyone who told lies against a Brandon is a stranger because being a Brandon, I say anyone who told lies against a Brandon and had a Brandon locked up, whether it was lies typed in a police report against a Brandon, or whether it was lies typed in a courtroom against a Brandon, or whether it was lies told in a courtroom against a Brandon, the stranger is the person who told lies against a Brandon. The stranger is the person who typed lies against a Brandon. And the stranger is the person who caused problems to a Brandon. And I say it is the stranger because since being a Brandon myself, being a witness of my life, of where I was and where I am at, I say it was a stranger who caused all those problems to me. And I say it was a stranger because I do not know them. Meaning, a person who I do not know is a stranger. A person who I do not know is a stranger. So, a video of strangers. They say a stranger could have made it all so simple. Instead of causing problems to a Brandon, a stranger could have simply said, a stranger does not know a Brandon. So since a stranger does not know a Brandon, there was never a reason for a stranger causing trouble to a Brandon of going against a Brandon, sexually abusing a Brandon, yelling at or accusing a Brandon of lies a Brandon never did. So it's crazy. One of the craziest events happened at this hotel one time. A stranger stood in the door yelling at me, accusing me of kicking a stranger out of my room, accusing me of using a stranger for a place of living. And it makes no sense because the evidence shows Brandon has always been the head of Brandon's own household, whether in an apartment or a hotel room. Since I was 18 years old, I started living in hotel rooms. And when I was 20, I got my first apartment. And I had an apartment when it was August 31st, 2004, and July 18th, 2006, and October 6th, 2008. And after October 6th, 2008, I had a house. And I had a house before then in Eastlake, in the city of Birmingham, Alabama. I had a house, paying rent. So, some stranger had told lies accusing me, of using a stranger for a place of living when it is no evidence of it ever being that way. So they say whoever the stranger was yelling at me in the door is guilty of lies and slander and defamation of character. And then, it would be sickening and disgusting, for a stranger claiming being married to him. A person who falsely accused me when I have been a mental health patient ever since elementary school, and I never had sex outside of the identity of what my marriage license certificate says my marriage is. I never went all the way. I never scored. I never got a nut inside of anyone's mouth, womb, or bit outside of my marriage license certificate, evidence of what my marriage is.